All right. My name is David Hartful, and I'm from Black Leadership Analysis, and I wanted to talk to you today about, after I get my camera straight, how to talk about racial conflict to white people. And I think this is very important because I started a blog, and the blog is about race and racial conflict. And so I want to talk in my blog about interracial conflict between blacks and whites, and also intra-racial conflict, which is conflict between black people. And I went to the 2019 Buddhism and Race Conference at Harvard University this weekend. And they had 4 panelists, and they talked about different issues they face while being black and Buddhist in America. And I'm all for being able to talk about your unique personal experiences in front of people, because I think that's how we build dialogue with one another. But when you do this, you have to be careful not to perpetuate any racial stereotypes or disparage black people while you're doing it. Okay? So this is a very delicate thing to do. And in the Buddhism and Race Conference, I found that a lot of the panelists, they spent a lot of time talked about different issues they faced as a black Buddhist, dealing in spaces that were majority white and Asian. But they didn't really talk enough about how they've overcome it and how they end up not having animosity between us, whites and Asians. Also, when they talked about intra-racial conflict that black people have amongst themselves, they were clear to make sure that the audience understood that they didn't still have an issue with all black people, or they had issues with, or that they didn't stereotype or perpetuating stereotypes about black people, like we're all overly aggressive or not able to handle rational arguments. And so this is just as much, again, a reply to the Harvard 2019 Buddhism and Race Conference as it is just a general thing I see on YouTube with black people that try to talk about different racial conflicts. So when you're talking about interracial conflicts, one of the things that really stuck to me when I was at the Buddhism and Race Conference in Harvard, one of the white guys stood up and he was like, man, I never understood how much trauma black people go through dealing in non-black spaces. And he felt like a sense of pity for us. And I didn't want white people to come away with a sense of pity. I want white people to come away with the sense of black people are experiencing these conflicts. We understand the conflict, okay? And we're growing past these different conflicts. And we are going through it without having resentment against whites or anybody else. And we're also going through it without having resentment to each other. We're also not perpetuating stereotypes against whites or stereotypes against other black people. And so one thing I saw in the conference was a lot of black people, even black Buddhist spiritual leaders, were talking too much about how they had different problems dealing with white people. I think it's a lot more productive to say that, talk about how you move past it, and what you're doing to really build a larger community of black Buddhists or people of color Buddhists or people that racially informed people that involve themselves with Buddhism. I think that's a lot more constructive, a lot more of a constructive conversation to have. And I didn't feel that the discussions that were had at that conference really reflected that. This one lady in the conference, I won't say her name, but she was talking about how she had a temple in the rural deep south, and then she was in a town that black folks didn't even feel comfortable walking down the streets of Main Street. I have 3 people in the chat right now, so please shout yourselves out, or anybody else. Ask questions through the whole thing. So, yes, so thank you for anybody who's actually on here listening. Like I was saying about the conference, though, they really should have had more talk and dealing with the fact that we're building a more inclusive community. So one lady on it, she was talking about how she was a somebody that was in a temple, leading a temple in the rural South. And the county she was in, black folks were scared to even walk down the street or go down Main Street or leave their little segregated area. So she started a temple there, and she was working with a lot of white people. And some of those white people were just blatantly racist, calling her the N-word and everything. And after she was there a certain amount of time, they referred to her as mama whatever. And I was just thinking to myself, that's not a term of respect even for black people, because so often black people have been considered mammy, and also white people, instead of saying Mr. or Mrs. to a black person in the South, they will call them uncle or aunt, because they didn't want to give black people the respect of calling them Mr. and Mrs. So for these white people that essentially hate you to turn from that and start calling you mama whatever, that's not necessarily a term of endearment. I think she should have been really clear about that and understand that part of it also. Also, if you're living in a town where black people feel intimidated just to walk down the streets of Main Street, your first priority as a black spiritual teacher is to address that issue. The first priority is not to get a whole bunch of white people to join your temple or your church. And I was really disappointed that she didn't really spend her time outreaching to the black community and worry too much about trying to outreach to the white community. So I didn't like that about her talks at all. And to some extent, I kind of just I agree that she's going to have a lot of conflict and difficulty, and she should, if she's not working to build the people of color sangha there in that community and get the word of mindfulness out to the people of color and minority communities. That's how it's going to be if you're in predominantly a lot of spaces with people that aren't black. That's just how it's going to be. So it's hard for me to really have sympathy for what she even went through dealing in the South if I didn't know that she was actually taking time to really build the people of color community in that area. And I'm also somebody who spends a lot of time on YouTube. So a friend of mine, she's a big Jordan Peterson fan. So she sent me a video of a black woman that supports Jordan Peterson. Now, in this video, they didn't go into it in detail. But Jordan Peterson is actually a racial realist. He's somebody who believes that black people have statistically lower IQ. Now, the problem with just IQ in general, most scientists don't even consider IQ a scientific measurement, because there's no way to define intelligence in that. There's no one test that can test all the different types of intelligence. So you could be intelligent as far as reading comprehension. You can be intelligent as far as mechanical reasoning, and you can fix a car, or you can fix a boat, or you can fix a lawnmower. You can be intelligent in emotional intelligence, being able to work with and talk to people. You also be intelligent in like hundreds of other ways. So the idea of IQ, like there's one measure of intelligence, is not scientific. And people have understood that since the 60s and 70s. So for Peterson to be bringing back the discussion of IQ shows that he's anti-scientific, just as anti-scientific as any climate denier. And I think that people that are in philosophical communities should call him out for that and not deal with them behind that. So she sent me this video of this woman, and I'm not going to say her name anyway, but it was a woman. She was black and Indian, but her black father wasn't around. So she grew up with an Indian woman who resented black people her whole life. So this woman who presents as black is growing up in Canada in a household which disparaged black people. So this woman in this video never built a love of black people her whole life. So when she speaks on Jordan Peterson, I'm not expecting her to understand my perspective of this is a man who's detrimental to the black struggle. This idea that black people are inherently inferior or have lower intelligence is the reason for segregation. It's the reason for genocide. It's the reason for discrimination. So to have somebody like a Jordan Peterson who promulgates that is a huge problem for me. And then to send me this video of this woman who presents as black but doesn't self-identify as black or have love for the black community wasn't helpful at all. And so that's something if you, and I think a lot of the reason she thought that that was okay to send to me was because I do talk online about different issues I've had with being black and dealing with other black people. But I try to express myself in a way that I've moved past that, and I understand the deeper underlying societal causes of a lot of the issues that I was going through. So I think that black people, if they're talking about racial conflict, they should always make sure to talk about how they've grown past it, and also understand the stereotypes used on black people. And if they're talking about intra-racial conflict, make sure to be clear that they understand the deeper racial or societal problems that black people face with intra-racial conflict, and be careful to explain how they've moved past it, and they're not disparaging all black people or trying to say black people are all bad or not or irrational. So that's all I gotta say.